My name is Rachel Moore. I'm 34, a public high school history teacher in Savannah, Georgia, the city where live oak branches stitch the sky and the sidewalks remember your footsteps. I rent a second-floor walk-up above a cafe that smells like cinnamon at 6 a.m., and I bike to school because parking is a nightmare and my students wave when they pass me on Habersham. My flaw? I'm too trusting, the kind of daughter who believes a smile over a signature, a promise over proof. That flaw almost cost me everything my father built. My stepmother drained my father's accounts, waved a forged will, and called me ungrateful. Then the lawyer reopened the file, and the envelope Dad hid proved the real heir was me. If you're watching this, please like and subscribe. It means more than you know. These stories take guts to tell, and your support helps them reach the people who need to hear them. And I want to hear from you. Have you ever had someone in your own family claim what was yours? Tell me where you're watching from and what fair would have looked like in your story. I'll be reading the comments tonight with a cup of tea. Okay, back to the beginning. Savannah wears memory like perfume. It lingers. It clings. Even now, if I turn the right corner at dusk, Jones Street, chipped brick, gas lamps hissing, I can hear my dad's laugh cutting through the humidity. Michael Moore, contractor turned small-time developer, a man who could look at a rotten porch and see a wedding in it. Old bones are honest, Rach, he'd say, palm on a handrail. You listen long enough, they'll tell you what they need. He built houses the way he raised me, carefully with patience and sandpaper, and a belief that if you keep working, the rough edges will round out. Sundays were our religion. Not church, we went sometimes, but the porch was the real sanctuary. I'd bring grocery store flowers. He'd brew sweet tea that could knock a horse over. We'd plan the week under a whirring fan, talk about my kids at school, his subs on, a new Reno, and the roofline that annoyed him. If I worried about money, about a student, about the future, he'd tilt his head, blue eyes crinkling. I already invested in my best project, he'd say. You. I'd roll my eyes and pretend not to glow. He remarried when I was 26. Elaine. She was pretty the way a storefront is pretty. Curated. Pearls for morning, something silk for evening, a smile that made men straighten and women measure. She arrived with a bottle of Sancerre and a story about finding home after a season of loss. I gave her the benefit of every doubt. Of course I did. Too trusting, remember? The first time she put a hand on my shoulder, her nails were pale and perfect and cool. Rachel, she said, I'm not trying to be your mother. I just want us to be allies. She held the word like a favorite charm. Allies. I wanted that. I wanted family to mean expansion, not eviction. For a while it did. Dinners with candles. A Christmas tree so tall we had to borrow a ladder from a neighbor. Elaine brought flowers that matched the napkins. She brought energy, ideas. She called me sweetheart and honey and told people I was brilliant in that tone that sells a house. If there were hairline fractures, I didn't see them, only felt the faintest drafts. The first crack? Maybe the afternoon she helped Dad organize a drawer in his office. She labeled everything the way a person labels what they plan to. Keep, insurance policies, bank statements, closing docs. She held a pen like it was a wand. You two swim in paper, she laughed. Let me just streamline. My father smiled, grateful. I said nothing because gratitude is contagious, and confrontation is not my native language. The second crack, the day Dad started saying, ask Elaine, when I asked about permits or timelines or, once, wills. Don't worry about it. Rach, he said, squeezing my fingers. It's all taken care of. I believed him because I trusted him, and I trusted her because he did. That's how it works, right? The web of trust stretches, and you don't notice the holes until you fall through. Then came the illness. Summer heat that made the air a syrup you had to chew, and Dad started napping in the afternoons. "Just tired," he said, waving me off. By September, he was coughing, sharp, a carpenter's saw through soft wood. Doctors, tests. Elaine handled the calls. "I've got it," she'd say, plucking charts from my hands. "You focus on your classroom, sweetheart. He needs you. Calm." Calm became quiet. Quiet became absent. "I know what you're thinking. Speak up, Rachel." I wish I had. I wish I'd planted myself in every waiting room and asked for every printout. But grief is a fog, and I made a home in it. I cooked. I read to him. I fixed the fan that rattled like a pocket of coins. And when Elaine said, "I'll meet with the lawyer," I let her. My kids at school asked what stage of the American Revolution we were in, and I stood there, chalk in hand, thinking only about the battle in my father's lungs. "We're at the part," I said, "where the sides are chosen and no one knows who will win." They nodded, thinking I meant Washington and Cornwallis. Maybe I did. When Dad died, a Tuesday that drained all the blue from the sky, I sat on the porch and counted his breaths until there weren't any left to count. Elaine folded into herself, a silk scarf collapsing. I wrapped her in a blanket, made tea because that's what women do in the South when the world ends. We brew, we stir, we sweeten the unsweetenable. The funeral was magnolias and murmurs, hands on my back, words like stones in pockets. "So sorry for your loss. He was a good man, time and mercy and faith." Elaine cried beautifully. I stood beside her and held my father's memory like a torch. And then, because death is rude and bureaucracy loves a calendar, the lawyer. A week later, his office on Oglethorpe, blinds half closed against the afternoon glare, diplomas lined up like soldiers. Elaine sat with her ankles crossed, one hand on the strap of a bag I recognized from an invoice I shouldn't have seen. I felt small in my thrift store black dress, like a girl again, like the first day of kindergarten when your lunchbox feels like armor. "Thank you both for coming," the lawyer said. He opened a folder, papers whispering. "We'll review the estate." I watched Elaine's mouth soften at the edges. She glanced at me. And in that split second, the perfume of memory lifted, and something else seeped in, something sharp. I didn't have the word for it then. I do now. It was the scent of a theft already rehearsed. I didn't know about the forged page. Not yet. I didn't know about the envelope tucked where only a man who sanded his own stairs would hide it. I only knew my father's office had a new arrangement, my name had a new distance, and the woman who called me sweetheart had a new gravity in the room. This is where it begins to hurt. This is where the trust that raised me becomes the rope I have to cut. And I will, I promise. Because I learned something my dad forgot to say out loud. Old bones are honest, but only if you listen. And I was finally listening. Savannah has a way of holding on to stories. Every house has layers, every porch a history. My father used to say the city taught him how to build, because it whispered reminders. Nothing worth keeping comes easy, and nothing solid stands without care. He was a builder, through and through. Michael Moore Construction wasn't some flashy company with billboards. It was his name stenciled on the side of a dusty Ford truck, his hands cracked from years of carpentry, his reputation carried by word of mouth. People trusted him. If Dad built it, you knew it would last. Growing up, I was his shadow. Summers meant riding in that truck, handing him nails, holding a flashlight while he patched roofs in the July heat. Other girls my age were at the pool, or the mall. I was in denim shorts, covered in sawdust, learning how to tell when a joist was rotten by the smell. He never treated me like I was delicate. "History books are fine, Rach," he'd tease. "But remember, these houses are history, 2. Families will live here, cry here, celebrate here. You build it right. You give them more than walls. You give them safety. It made sense that I grew into a history teacher. I wanted to pass that reverence for the past forward, even if my tools were chalk and old maps instead of hammers and drills. Dad loved that. He'd sit on my porch with a beer and say, "You and me? We're preservationists. Different materials, same calling." We had our rhythms. Friday night dinners at my birthday, he made gumbo, his own version, too spicy, too smoky, but made with a grin that made it perfect. That was life until Elaine. The first time Dad introduced her, it was spring. Dogwoods in bloom, air sticky with jasmine. She was younger than him by almost 15 years, with that polished glow people get when they spend as much time in salons as they do in their own kitchens. I remember thinking, she's too polished for us, too careful. But Dad's face lit up, and I wanted him to be happy. "She's been through a lot," he whispered once, after she excused herself to take a call. "Lost her mother young, tough marriage, but she's kind, Rachel. She listens." And she did, at least at first. She asked about my students, praised Dad's work, and even helped set the table for Sunday dinners. She slid in like she'd been rehearsing our traditions. But little things stood out. She didn't drink sweet tea. Too much sugar, she said. So she brought sparkling water in glass bottles, clinking like jewelry. She wrinkled her nose at Dad's gumbo. "So heavy," and suggested charcuterie boards instead. When I teased that it was just cheese and meat on a slab, she laughed too loudly and said, "Presentation matters, sweetheart." Dad didn't mind. He said, "She's updating us, Rach." Me. I tried to adapt, but a part of me felt like our rituals were being replaced, brick by brick. There were bigger signs, too. When Dad caught the flu one winter, Elaine was suddenly the gatekeeper. She organized the doctor's visits, picked up prescriptions, and kept a binder with tabs. "I'm just helping," she'd say with that polished smile. And Dad, tired and grateful, let her. I wanted to ask questions about insurance, about his retirement, about his will. But every time Elaine intercepted. "Don't burden him, honey," she'd murmur. "He needs peace, not paperwork." One evening, I stayed late after grading essays, and when I stopped by their house, I found Elaine at Dad's desk. Papers spread out, pen in hand. She looked up, startled, then smiled quickly. "Oh, Rachel," she said. "Just organizing. Your father hates clutter." I laughed it off, told myself I was paranoid. But I couldn't ignore the faint whiff of expensive perfume on documents that should have smelled like dust and ink. Looking back, the cracks were there, hairline at first. Elaine praising me in front of friends. "Rachel's brilliant, she's a teacher, can you believe?" Then lowering her voice later. "But you're not exactly good with numbers, are you, sweetheart?" My father would brush it off. "She's just teasing," he'd say, patting my hand. And because I trusted him, I trusted her. That's what hurts most, looking back. I didn't see the scaffolding she was building, not of support, but of control. She was positioning herself, step by step, to own everything when he was gone. And I, too trusting, too blind, let her. The first real sign came the summer after Dad and Elaine's second anniversary. He was slowing down by then, complaining of fatigue, coughing more than he admitted. I'd stop by after work with casseroles or soup, just to make sure he was eating. One evening, I carried in a pan of baked ziti and found Elaine already in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, sorting through a stack of envelopes, bills, bank statements, insurance notices. "Oh, sorry," I said, setting the dish down. "Didn't mean to interrupt." She gave me that polished smile. "You're fine, sweetheart. Just helping your father keep things straight." I frowned. Dad's always kept his own accounts. She slid one envelope into the drawer a little too quickly. "Well, he trusts me. That's what marriage is, isn't it? Trust?" My stomach nodded. As long as he's the one making decisions. Her smile never wavered. Of course. But the way she said it made my skin crawl. Another crack appeared when Dad and I sat on the porch one Sunday. I brought sweet tea. Elaine poured herself sparkling water from a glass bottle. "Rachel," she said casually, "you've got that little apartment, right? Charming, but small. Don't you ever think of upgrading?" I shrugged. "I'm fine where I am. It's just me." She leaned forward, eyes glinting. "But when your father's gone, God forbid, it'll be a lot to manage, won't it? The house, the business, all the finances. You're not really wired for that sort of thing." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. "Excuse me?" Dad chuckled, oblivious. "She underestimates you, Rach. You've got more grit than anyone I know." Elaine smiled sweetly at him. "Of course she does. I just mean, numbers aren't her thing. Teaching is." I wanted to argue, to call her out, but Dad squeezed my hand, and because I trusted him, I let it go. The moment that still makes my blood boil happened at the hospital during one of Dad's checkups. I stepped into the hallway to ask a nurse about his results, and Elaine intercepted me, her voice low and sharp. "You don't need to bother the doctors," she hissed. "You'll only confuse him." I blinked. "I'm his daughter. I have every right." She leaned closer, her perfume cloying. "You have every right to grieve, Rachel, not to manage. That's my role now. You should focus on your students, not on matters you'll never understand." My throat tightened. "Don't talk down to me." Her lips curled. "Then stop acting like a child." I wanted to shout, but Dad wheeled out just then, smiling, pale, but trying to be strong. "My girls," he said warmly, and just like that, the fight was swallowed. The whispers started too. Family friends would call and say things like, "Elaine's doing such a good job keeping everything in order," with a tone that suggested I wasn't. At gatherings, Elaine would pat my arm and laugh, "Rachel's brilliant with books but hopeless with budgets." People chuckled. I forced a smile, cheeks burning. One night, after she made that joke for the third time, I whispered through clenched teeth, "Why do you always undermine me?" She tilted her head, smirked. "If that's what you hear, maybe you're too sensitive." Gaslighting. That's what it was. I didn't know the word then, but I felt it. A slow erosion of my confidence, of my place in my father's life. By the time Dad's illness worsened, Elaine was everywhere. At his appointments, at the lawyer's office, even taking calls meant for me. When I tried to talk to him about it, late one night while Elaine was out running errands, he sighed. "She just wants to help, Rach. You don't have to worry. Everything's written down, clear as day." I nodded, biting back the urge to argue. Because I trusted him. Because I wanted to believe. But deep down, I knew. Something was shifting, and I was about to be cut out of the very legacy he had promised was mine. The day my father died, Savannah was drenched. The storm rolled in heavy, thunder shaking the glass panes, rain pounding the mossy sidewalks. I sat by his bed, his hand limp in mine, the room filled with the low hum of machines and the sterile scent of antiseptic. Elaine dabbed her eyes with a silk handkerchief. Her tears fell neat, elegant, like she'd practiced. Mine came messy. My father squeezed once, weak, barely there, and then the monitor slowed. Flatlined, just like that. The funeral was a blur of black umbrellas and casseroles on the porch. People pressed my hand, whispered sympathy, and drifted off into the drizzle. I remember standing under the magnolia tree, its blossoms battered by the storm, thinking, what happens now? The answer came a week later. The lawyer's office was downtown, oak-paneled, the air smelling of leather and dust. Diplomas lined the walls, his desk stacked with neat files. Elaine swept in wearing a black dress that hugged her like armor, pearls around her throat, a designer bag resting at her feet. I sat across from her, knees bouncing, heart pounding. "Thank you for coming," the lawyer said. We're here to read Mr. Moore's last will. I braced myself. Dad had always told me, everything I've built is for you, Rachel. The lawyer unfolded the papers, eyes scanning. It states here, the estate, including the family home, financial accounts, and business shares, is to be left to... He hesitated. Elaine Moore. My head snapped up. What? Elaine's lips curved, the faintest smile tugging at the corners. She placed a manicured hand on mine. Sweetheart, your father wanted someone responsible. You have your teaching, your own life. He wanted me to carry the weight. I jerked my hand away. That's not true. He told me. He promised. The lawyer cleared his throat. I have signed documents here. This is what he left behind. The room spun. My ears rang. Everything? The house we built together, the savings he'd worked for, the business with his name. It was all hers? Elaine tilted her head, voice soft but sharp. I know this is hard, Rachel, but he loved you. He just didn't want you burdened with responsibilities you couldn't handle. My chest burned. Burdened? He wanted me to inherit. Everyone knows it. Her smile widened, just enough for me to see the victory in it. Do they? She asked quietly. Tears stung my eyes. The lawyer shuffled papers, avoiding my gaze. I looked around, searching for someone, anyone, to speak up. But the only sound was the clock ticking on the wall. I walked out of that office numb. On the sidewalk, the sun was too bright, the world too normal. People laughed at cafe tables, children tugged at balloons. And I had just been erased from my father's legacy. That night, I sat alone on my porch, papers spread around me. Bank accounts drained. The house deed was signed over. Business shares are gone. All of it transferred neatly into Elaine's hands. I whispered into the night, voice trembling. She took everything. And the silence answered back. The week after the will reading was the longest of my life. Dad's laugh echoes down Whitaker Street. His calloused hands were fixing shutters. The house, our house, is now legally hers. Elaine wasted no time claiming it. Within days, she changed the locks. I went to drop off flowers on the porch and found a shiny new security system blinking red at me. I knocked once, twice. She opened the door just enough to look me over, lips painted, eyes cold. Oh, Rachel, she said. This isn't healthy. You need to move on. I swallowed hard. That's my home. Her smile was sharp. Not anymore. And then the door clicked shut in my face. I stood there on the porch where Dad and I had shared tea every Sunday. Bills started piling up. My teacher's salary covered rent and groceries, but not much else. The inheritance had been my safety net. Without it, every unexpected cost felt like a tidal wave. Friends left voicemails. Rachel, we're worried about you. I ignored them. Nights stretched into dawns, my eyes red from crying. My students noticed. One of them asked, Ms. Moore, are you okay? I forced a smile, changed the subject. But inside, I was unraveling. One night, I sat on the floor of my apartment, papers scattered around me. My father's handwriting is nowhere to be seen, just neat signatures that didn't look like his. I poured a glass of wine, then another. My hands shook so badly that I spilled it across the documents, the ink bleeding like wounds. I whispered into the empty room, voice breaking. He promised it was mine. For the first time, I thought about giving up, selling what little I had, leaving Savannah, starting over somewhere no one knew me. It would have been easier than fighting a battle I couldn't win. But then, something happened. I reached for an old photo album, the one Dad had given me when I graduated from college. Tucked inside the back cover, folded and yellowed, was a letter. My breath caught. It was in his handwriting. "Rachel," it began. "If you're reading this, I'm gone. Don't let grief blind you. Elaine will make things difficult. But trust the lawyer. Trust the process. Everything will be clear in the end. I built all of this for you. Don't forget that." Tears blurred the words. My father knew. He saw her for what she was, even if he never said it aloud. He left me a warning. A spark. I pressed the letter to my chest and whispered through sobs, "Okay, Dad. I'll fight." That night, the fog of despair lifted just enough for me to see a path forward. I wasn't strong yet, but I was no longer broken. The morning after I found my father's letter, I woke up with swollen eyes, but a sharper mind. His words burned in my chest. Trust the lawyer. Everything will be clear in the end. For weeks I had been drowning, but now I had a rope. I went back to the law office on Oglethorpe, the one that still smelled like old leather and lemon polish. The lawyer, Mr. Whitman, looked surprised to see me. He was older, with silver hair, glasses perched low on his nose. "Rachel," he said, "I thought you needed time." I slid the folded letter across his desk. My father left this. He wanted me to fight. He read it, lips pressed tight. Then he sighed. "Your father was a cautious man. He made me promise to keep a sealed envelope in my files. I didn't bring it out because—" He hesitated, lowering his voice. "Elaine produced alternate paperwork, but if you're ready, we can reopen everything." My pulse hammered. "I'm ready." That was the first crack in Elaine's fortress. Whitman explained the process. The courts would need proof of fraud. Signatures, dates, inconsistencies. It wasn't enough to claim my father had been pressured. We had to show Elaine had forged or manipulated. So I started gathering. Quietly. I called my Aunt Marie in Charleston, Dad's younger sister. Over the phone, her voice wavered. "Rachel, I knew something was off. Elaine pushed me out. Your father never would have cut you out. Never." I asked if she had any letters or documents in Dad's handwriting. She did. Christmas cards, notes from birthdays. I asked her to send them. Next, I visited Dad's old business partner, Bill Henderson. His workshop smelled of cedar and motor oil. When I explained, his jaw tightened. "Your dad always said the business was yours if you wanted it," Bill muttered. He rummaged through a file cabinet and handed me old contracts with Dad's signature. "Compare these. You'll see." I thanked him, heart pounding. Meanwhile, I played it cool with Elaine. I stopped arguing, stopped showing up at the house. I let her think I'd surrendered. When we ran into each other at the grocery store, she smirked. "Rachel," she said, "I'm glad you're finding peace. It's better this way." I smiled back, keeping my voice calm. "You're right. Dad would have wanted peace." She tilted her head, eyes searching mine, maybe wondering if I was broken or just pretending. I didn't flinch. Inside, I was cataloging every word, every slip, every detail. At night, my apartment became an evidence lab. I spread papers across the table, wills, contracts, bank statements. I highlighted mismatched signatures, circled dates that didn't line up. Dad's name is written in loops and flourishes on one page, tight and stiff on another. I even found a bank transfer, tens of thousands, moved from his account to Elaine A.'s just weeks before his death, labeled as a gift. But Dad never mentioned it. I printed screenshots, made copies, built a binder like a war manual. Every click of the pen, every sticky note I slapped down, felt like a piece of myself returning. But I wasn't alone. Mr. Whitman became my quiet ally, guiding me on what would matter in court. Aunt Marie mailed me a stack of Dad's handwritten notes. Bill vouched for his business intentions. Even Jared, the banker Dad had used for years, agreed to discreetly review suspicious transfers. Piece by piece, the story took shape. Elaine hadn't just inherited, she had maneuvered, manipulated, and forged. And she was about to learn what happens when the woman she underestimated refuses to stay silent. One night, sitting at my cluttered kitchen table, I whispered into the quiet, "You wanted me powerless, Elaine. But you taught me something instead." I closed the binder, hand firm on the cover. "You taught me how to fight." The first time I tested Elaine's armor, it was almost by accident. I ran into her at the farmer's market on a Saturday morning. She was wearing oversized sunglasses, a designer tote over her arm, picking through tomatoes like she owned the whole city. "Rachel," she said, "how are you holding up, sweetheart?" I steadied my basket. "Better than you think." Her brow arched. "Oh?" I tilted my head, pretending to be casual. "Funny thing, I was going through Dad's papers the other night. His signature looked different on some of those documents." For a flicker, just a flicker, her smile cracked. Her grip on the tomato tightened, knuckles white. Then she laughed, airy and dismissive. "Grief makes you imagine things. Best not to dwell." But her eyes darted, and I knew I'd struck a nerve. The second win came from the bank. Jared, the banker Dad had trusted, called me after reviewing accounts. "Rachel," he said, "your father never authorized that transfer to Elaine's account. Not in person, not over the phone. The signature looks doctored." I pressed the phone to my ear, heart racing. "Can you testify to that?" He hesitated. "If it comes to it, yes." I wrote his words down in bold, not authorized, forged. Then there was the lawyers' meeting. Mr. Whitman invited me in, and this time, instead of silence, he spread documents across the desk. "Look here," he pointed. "The will Elaine presented was notarized in August. But your father was in the hospital that week under heavy medication. I have records of it." I leaned in, pulse hammering. "So he couldn't have signed it?" He nodded. "Not legally, no." I felt my chest lift for the first time in months. The pieces weren't just suspicion anymore. They were evidence. Still, I kept Elaine close. When she invited me to dinner to clear the air, I went. She poured wine, lit candles, and acted like the gracious widow. Halfway through the meal, I set my glass down and said quietly, "It's strange, isn't it? Dad always told me he'd leave the business to me, but the paperwork says otherwise." Elaine's fork clinked against her plate. Her smile tightened. "Your father changed his mind. He thought you couldn't handle it." I met her eyes, steady. Or maybe someone changed it for him. Her face flushed red, but she quickly recovered, sipping her wine. "Careful, Rachel. Accusations like that can make you look unstable." I smiled. "Or they can make you look guilty." The rest of the dinner was silent, but I left knowing she was rattled. At home, I pulled out my binder. It was thick now, bursting with tabs and notes. I ran my hand over the cover, feeling stronger than I had since the funeral. These weren't just papers. They were weapons. For the first time since Elaine slammed that door in my face, I felt hope. She thought she'd erased me. But I was still here, still fighting. And soon, the truth would drag her down in front of everyone. The summons came in early spring. After months of quiet digging, late-night binder work, and whispered strategy meetings with Mr. Whitman, the probate court finally scheduled a hearing to review my father's estate. It was my chance, my one shot to expose Elaine. The courtroom smelled faintly of dust and disinfectant, oak benches polished smooth by decades of cases. A ceiling fan hummed lazily, moving the heavy Savannah air. I sat at one table, heart pounding, binder stacked in front of me. Mr. Whitman sat beside me, calm as ever. Elaine swept in 5 minutes late, pearls gleaming, her black dress tailored like a uniform. She carried herself like a woman who had already won, sliding into her seat with a smirk. The judge, a stern man with deep creases around his mouth, adjusted his glasses. "We're here to resolve discrepancies in the estate of Michael Moore." Elaine's lawyer stood first, voice smooth. "Your Honor, the will is clear. Everything was left to my client, Mrs. Elaine Moore. Ms. Rachel Moore is unfortunately mistaken about her late father's intentions." I swallowed hard. My hands trembled under the table. Mr. Whitman gave me a small nod. My turn would come. When it did, Whitman stood, voice steady. "Your Honor, we believe the documents presented by Mrs. Moore are fraudulent. We have evidence of forged signatures, bank transfers labeled as gifts that were unauthorized, and a sealed letter from Mr. Moore himself." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Elaine's head snapped toward him, her smile faltering. The judge leaned forward. "Proceed." Whitman laid out the evidence piece by piece. First, the hospital records. According to medical files, Mr. Moore was under heavy sedation in August, the same week this contested will was allegedly signed. He was in no condition to make legal decisions. Next, the banker's testimony. Jared stepped forward nervously, tie crooked. Mr. Moore never authorized the transfer to Mrs. Moore's personal account. The signature on the request form, it isn't his. Elaine shifted in her seat, eyes narrowing. Then came the comparison charts. Aunt Marie's cards, Bill's contracts, Dad's old paperwork, all lined up against the so-called will. The signatures didn't match, not even close. And finally, the letter. Whitman unfolded it slowly, like revealing treasure. "Your Honor, this was found in Ms. Moore's possession, handwritten by the deceased. It states, and I quote, 'Rachel, trust the lawyer. Everything will be clear in the end. I built all of this for you.'" The courtroom fell silent. I felt tears sting my eyes as I whispered to myself, "Thank you, Dad." Elaine shot to her feet, voice sharp. "That letter could be fake. She planted it." Whitman didn't flinch. Handwriting analysis already confirmed it matches decades of Mr. Moore's writing. We also have testimony from family members who received letters in the same hand. The judge rapped his gavel once, cutting through her outburst. "Mrs. Moore, sit down." She sat, face flushed crimson, jaw tight. For the first time, she looked cornered. When the judge delivered his ruling, my whole body shook. "Based on the evidence presented, I find that the documents supplied by Mrs. Moore cannot be authenticated and may constitute fraud. The original will leaving the estate to Ms. Rachel Moore shall be honored in full." Gasps again. My knees went weak. Elaine's face crumpled, the polished mask finally cracking. "Court is adjourned." The gavel fell, and it was over. Outside, on the courthouse steps, the sun hit my face. Reporters whispered, family members murmured, strangers stared. Elaine stormed past me, heels clicking, her lawyer trailing behind. She didn't look at me, not once. I held the binder tight against my chest, breathing hard. Months of humiliation, despair, and doubt, all vindicated in one public moment. I hadn't just reclaimed my inheritance. I had reclaimed my father's promise, my dignity, my place in the story. She tried to erase me. Instead, I erased her lies. The days after the hearing felt unreal. For months, Elaine had strutted through Savannah like a queen, clutching my father's legacy in manicured hands. Now, her kingdom was dust. Word spread fast. Neighbors whispered. Friends who once praised her elegance now avoided her calls. Even the church ladies, her favorite audience, stopped saving her a seat in the front pew. I heard through Aunt Marie that Elaine tried to salvage her reputation, claimed she was misunderstood, that the courts had overreacted. But the whispers of forgery clung to her like smoke. The bank flagged her accounts, the DA hinted at charges, and the invitations dried up. The woman who once looked down at me from the head of my father's porch now walked Savannah streets with her chin tucked low, sunglasses hiding her shame. As for me, the will was settled. The house was mine again. The first time I unlocked that front door, my hands trembled. The air inside smelled faintly of cedar and lemon polish, just like Dad kept it. I walked from room to room, fingertips brushing familiar walls, until I reached the porch. The fan still squeaked, the magnolia still swayed. I sat down, poured a glass of sweet tea, and whispered, "We did it, Dad." My students noticed the change in me, too. I wasn't the shadow I'd been those first months. I taught with fire again, weaving lessons of resilience into history, reminding them that power shifts when people fight for truth. Not everyone came back to my side. Some relatives who'd quietly sided with Elaine kept their distance, embarrassed now. And that was fine. Betrayal leaves scars. Not every bridge can be rebuilt. But I no longer cared about their approval, because I'd won something bigger than money or houses. I had won back myself. It's been a year since the ruling. Elaine moved away, last I heard, to Florida, living in a small condo, far from the grandeur she once flaunted. Maybe she found new people to fool. Maybe not. Either way, she's out of my life. I live in my father's house now. The porch has fresh paint, and the fan has been fixed. The magnolia tree blooms heavily every spring, petals falling like blessings. Sometimes I sit out there in the evenings, sipping tea, and I hear Dad's voice in the hum of the city. Old bones are honest, Rach. You just have to listen. I trusted too much, and it almost destroyed me. But I learned that trust without boundaries is just surrender. And surrender isn't love. It's erasure. Now I know better. Now I know that honoring someone's legacy means fighting for it, even when your voice shakes, even when you stand alone. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe to Unspoken Vows. And tell me, would you forgive a betrayal like this, or would you walk away forever? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments, because sometimes the vow you keep isn't the one you make to family, it's the one you make to yourself.